Hey everyone, this is Allan McKay. Welcome to episode 33. I'm interviewing Rising Sun Pictures, who are responsible for everything from Prometheus to Wolverine and X-Men and Gravity and a dozen other awesome, amazing films. Really killer episode. Let's get in there.
Welcome to the Allan McKay podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on allanmckay.com.
Hey everyone, this is Allan McKay, and welcome to episode 33. I'm really psyched to be interviewing RSP, or Rising Sun Pictures, which is a massive studio in Australia who's done so many big films. I'm just going to mention they've done Terminator Salvation, they've done a lot of Harry Potter films, they've done X-Men and Wolverine movies, actually all the Wolverine films, as well as movies like Gravity, Prometheus, lots of other really killer projects. Now, they do a lot of really great visual effects. They do a lot of very innovative tools. They develop CineSync, which is the industry standard for reviewing material and communicating around the world with other people. I use it all the time in production. Typically when you're sitting with a director, and you're in one location and they're in another, and you need to be able to review work and draw over sheets and be able to capture everything. So it's very, very cool, some of the kind of innovations they've made. Now, although they have worked on some really amazing projects, and we do dive into that a little bit, this was a really awesome episode because we kind of boycott all that and we had a chance to talk about a lot of other stuff. So I talked with Kirsty Parkin as well as Marcus Wells, who are both in the training department at RSP, and so they're kind of responsible for running a lot of what goes on there, as well as making sure that artists receive education as they come in, as well as looking ahead into educating future artists that may eventually get carved out into working in the industry. So they're doing some really innovative stuff with doing a graduate program, with doing even secondary school kind of internships, other really cool stuff that we get into, and it was just really insightful to actually get to talk to them about a lot of this. Now, in addition to that, we also got to talk about something which, since I first mentioned it a while back, I've noticed so much buzz going on around this subject, which is visas. And so we do not hold back, and it was really great to get a studio's perspective on the hiring process. And so rather than talking about like Dan Rority's episode, which I think was episode 31, that was a really great episode where we got to, discuss as an artist some of the things we can do to make things better, and typically what you got to go through. Now, as a studio who needs to hire artists and actually needs to typically do the work, usually it's the studio that has to do a majority of the work to get people in, and because of that, it was really great to kind of get a little bit of the background on what goes into that, as well as some really cool insights there. So a couple of the really cool things we talked about were to do with how to really kind of increase your opportunities with getting work by making yourself more of a viable candidate. So in some cases, maybe taking the initiative and going further as to do the work on your end, to kind of line up all your ducks in a row and make sure that you've got everything you need, so that way they just need to pull the trigger and you're ready to get hired. And going further with that, as well as to, go in, as they mentioned, take, let's say, an English test, if that's a situation you need to go through, but communicate all these things, because it's actually going to position you in a better place if you're able to say, hey, I really don't want to work for your company, I understand, and you can even name drop the podcast, because that way they'll see how you're being proactive. Like, after listening to the podcast or whatever, I understand that you require these things, so I've gone and taken the initiative and done all this, so that way I've got all this stuff lined up and I'm ready to go. And I mention that just because it means that you've done your research, you pay attention, you're passionate about, you're showing interest in their company by mentioning all those things. So all those things are win-win-win, and it's well worthwhile kind of playing the game of making sure that you show your interest in, as they mentioned about how like they'll get email applications where it says like RE, like reply, or it's sent to the wrong person. And I've gotten those emails too, where someone literally has CC'd every studio and sent like a group mass email. And those are the kind of emails that you almost want to email them back and be like, dude, what are you doing? But that sort of thing does happen, and it's just well worthwhile kind of understanding, that this sort of thing happens, so that way you can kind of point out how much you're the opposite of this and show that you're showing interest in the company, you're personalizing your application, you know what's required for the visa application, so you've gone and taken care of as much on your end, so that way they know if they were to hire you, that you would be an ideal candidate. So all these things are really useful bits of information that can really increase your opportunity getting into a company. Now, all that aside, a couple of things I'm just going to mention really quick that have come up that are really exciting and well worth mentioning. So, first of all, the LA industry drinks. I've mentioned this before, and it's been kind of like a long time in the making. And I have hosted a few events in LA before similar to this, but now it's official that the last Friday of every month, I'm going to be hosting in Los Angeles a industry drinks event. So typically it'll be in the same location, but I'm going to try out a few different places. But the idea is that everyone from games, from design and motion graphics, visual effects like film, commercials, whatever, is all more than welcome to come along, and we'll all get together and drink, socialize, network, do all that stuff. And I've done this so much in the past, and I've always seen like a lot of really great business come out of it. Even one time, a good buddy of mine, which he'll be there next Friday, I introduced him to the motion capture guys over at Blur, and a lot of business came from that, which now they're working with them. There's also been like other situations where, again, people meeting up, jobs happen, great connections happen, even sometimes friendships happen, and it's always been like really, really cool. So, I think it's just going to be a fun thing to kind of do, very laid back. It isn't kind of like something you roll up in a suit or anything, but I'm in Santa Monica, and typically this sort of thing, I think Santa Monica is best for it because most of the studios are out here, and good luck to anyone in Burbank or somewhere like that getting on the 405 at 6 p.m. on a Friday to get out here. But, for anyone on like the west side, I think this will be great. And I know, obviously, this is a worldwide broadcast, but, I think for anyone even passing through LA, I think that'll be great to be like, whoa, it's going to be, last Friday, cool, time to jump in. Like Sol Rogers, I did the VR episodes with, he just hit me up and he's like, I'm going to be in LA this week. And sadly, he's flying out to back to London Thursday night. So I'm like, And the other thing is, it's my birthday on Friday too. So I'll be celebrating my birthday. So lots of shenanigans to happen, I'm sure. And if you want to find out more, simply go to allanmckay.com/drinks. Now, kind of like the VIP list, well, in the sense that I'm going to be putting together just a list for anyone who wants to be kept up to date. So again, if you're coming to LA a lot, maybe it's worthwhile jumping on that so that way you have access to it. Now, this is exclusively just for the drinks list. So the only emails you ever get is like once a month saying, hey, we're going to be doing it at this place. That's about it. And just the details for this coming Friday, May 1st, it will be 7 p.m. at the Casa del Mar Hotel in Santa Monica. So that's right on the beach, actually opens up onto the Santa Monica boardwalk. And I've hosted it before over there once or twice, and it's always been a pretty good turnout. Last time it was about 30 people, so it's pretty big. The place is very spacious. I have been tempted to go to other venues that are a lot more tighter just because everyone gets rowdier, shots happen, and craziness ensues. But I think this will be a great venue just to kind of everyone show up and get to talk and hang out. And again, it's such a small industry. Everyone pretty much knows each other. So that is it. I won't go on any more about that. But again, if you want to go to allanmckay.com/drinks, all lowercase, you'll be able to get the information for whatever the next one is, as well as if you want to sign up to the list and get an email sent out. I'll probably do it like the week before every time, and that'll be exclusively for that. The final thing that I want to mention, and I've gotten so many emails about this, it's been awesome. I've literally been working around the clock, and that's not even close. I've been doing all-nighters all week to put together some really epic content specifically for the effecs TD mentorship program, just to celebrate it opening up for registration. If you're interested, get on the VIP list. This is probably one of the last times I'm going to be mentioning it, just because it will fill up quickly. And, like I said, I'm only mentioning it because I know there's a lot of people that I think will benefit from this. So, I'm jumping in, giving a little bit of a plug. But if you're interested, get on the VIP list. Thursday, I'm going to send an email out to let people get an exclusive kind of heads up ahead of everyone else. And then next week, I'll be officially letting everyone else in if it's not already sold out by then. So this will be a chance to get in ahead of anyone else and to, check it out and see if this is something right for you. And it won't be right for everyone. For me, the idea of this is that I want to get people in who are really hungry to kind of kick their butts and get ahead in their career, and give me permission to kick their butts when they're kind of dropping the ball, because I want this to be something that over the span of almost a year will work together in kind of building up our portfolio, building a lot of skills in a lot of different areas to do with effects. So it's going to be really, really cool. And like I said, if you get on that list, there's some really cool stuff I'm doing. In fact, I'll just mention it here. I'm putting together the biggest amount of free training content I've ever done in my entire life. It's about 15 hours of free, really high-end training material, and it's actually part of the material from just one of the modules inside the course. So again, not everyone on the podcast is 3D, but for those of you who are interested, this is well worth it just for that. Other than that, there's so much stuff I want to mention. I'm going to leave it till the end, but yeah, there's going to be, let's just say that I've gotten really inspired over the past week just by developing all this training content, and it's got me thinking about some stuff that is specific for everyone who listens to this podcast. So I'm going to be doing some really, really cool stuff. There's a couple of big events that, again, will be on the VIP list, but these are big free events that are going to be really awesome. And typically these are things that you would pay to sign up at a typical conference like SIGGRAPH or something like that. Finally, I just noticed this morning, I was checking the top 20 podcasts on iTunes just to see if there was anything cool in there I could listen to. And I didn't realize that in the careers section of iTunes, out of 250 million podcasts, this podcast is rated number 16. So that is so freaking awesome. And I just want to say thank you guys. Like, it still weirds me out to even see my ugly mug up on iTunes. So thanks again. And that is it. This is such an awesome episode, and I just had a lot to cover in the first portion of this, but now that's all out of the way, let's check out the episode. And again, I'd love to hear your comments. This is one I'd love for you guys to share around, just because I think it'll be really great exposure for RSP, and the stuff that they're doing is just really phenomenal. And again, it's something that I think will be just great for everyone. So that's it, guys. Stick around for the end. Like I said, I've got some cool announcements I want to run past you. I'm really psyched about. Hey everyone, this is Allan McKay. I am here with Marcus Wells and Kirsty Parkin from Rising Sun Pictures, who is responsible for a lot of pretty massive and epic films, such as, actually, first of all, just mention they're from Australia, from Adelaide, Australia, and responsible for a lot of films going back all the way to films like Red Planet, Lord of the Rings, all the way to stuff like some of the Batman films, Harry Potter, Wolverine films, Terminator Salvation, Pirates of the Caribbean, Hunger Games, Prometheus, all the way through to other films like Great Gatsby and also Gravity, of course, as well. So by far, one of the biggest studios in Australia. You guys are pretty responsible for some of the most phenomenal visual effects coming out pretty much every year from a lot of the visual effects side of films. I'm just kind of curious if one of you guys wants to elaborate a little bit on my attempt at giving you guys an intro.
It's pretty good. I think the interview's done, actually, Allan. That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. It's nice talking to you.
It's beer o'clock.
I guess Rising Sun Pictures is a very unique company in that it is privately owned, and it has this is the 20th year of the company's existence, and it's maintained original owners. It's been building up year after year on previous year's success, and really the future is very bright for the company. There's a great relationships with the studios, great relationships with artists. Don't appear to be any nasty blogs around or anything like that about some pictures. So we're looking forward to just continuing to pump out more work.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm from Australia, and like I've never had the chance to work with RSP, but mainly because you guys are in Adelaide. But yeah, for me, it's always been one of those places I held in really high regard, and you guys seem to be a magnet for getting really amazing talent, and not just in Australia, but also worldwide. So I know so many people have passed through there. I know I actually went on the website the other day, and like Paul Kerwin, Kirsty, and a few of those guys, still lurking around. And yeah, a lot of the guys I kind of grew up with, like back in the late 90s, are, have either done their time there or are still there. So I mean, it's kind of phenomenal, like the projects you guys are doing, and just some of like the stuff that you guys managed to pull off time and time again. I'm just kind of curious, what are some of the projects, I guess, that you can talk about, like that you might have wrapped up recently, and like what are some of the contributions you had to them?
I guess it's really hard to just not go past, which has possibly been done to death a little bit, but the contribution on X-Men Days of Future Past. And we do draw on that a lot because of the technical complexity of the project, the small number of people that were involved. We had about 40 people involved in the sequence that we did for Brian Silver, and it was just one of the most well-received sequences that I can recall in visual effects memory. It was the client was over the moon. They were absolutely happy with the results. We know we're a happy client when they smile at the other end of a webcam, and they make lovely comments like "smashed it out of the park." That's fantastic. But one of the wonderful things that happened was that the client actually provided a little bit of a tribute video of their own breakdown in their office of the Quicksilver sequence in the Pentagon. And we put that on at our regular Wednesday meeting, and they put music on, and they tried to slow things down a bit. But they were all actually having a celebratory drink, and they managed to. It was just a special tribute. And at the end of the video, they all held up their glasses and said, "Thank you very much." Now that was from the visual effects team who were involved, the VFX editor, the supervisor, the on-set people as well, and coordinators. And it was just it was a lovely sort of thumbs up for the work, that project as well.
It's one of those things when you are working a production, like to actually get that appreciation at the end, because usually everyone's in a mad scramble. So once the job's done, it's kind of like, okay, next time to move on to the next fire. So if you actually get that opportunity, it's pretty grateful.
It can be like that. I mean, I certainly recall working on projects, and I'm really not going to name them, but over the years that you've worked, and I'm sure you have too, Allan, where you've sweated, you've worked very long hours. It can at times have an effect on relationships, but you finally, it gets released a few months after finishing, or 9 months after finishing. You see it in the cinema, you're sitting there watching it, 90 minutes is over, and you can't help but think to yourself, well, there's 90 minutes of my life a year of my life I'll never get back again. But it all builds on the future, and that's, I guess, part of the philosophy of the company, is that the successes and also the mistakes of the past have to be learned from to make a better future for the company and the employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
The company, which really enjoys active involvement from the three company owners, Wayne Lewis, Tony Clark, and Gail Fuller, they tend to have a philosophy which is that don't burn yourself out. And
yeah, that's true. We don't, unless we really have to. I mean, obviously there are times in every project where you have to work crazy hours and crunch, but we generally don't do that. And, you and I are usually out the door by sort of 6, and we go grab lunch, and there's a culture that when we're here we work really hard.
Get in, get out.
Get in, do your work really hard, and then get out. Yeah. So there's a philosophy here that, if you're working till midnight every night, you're not likely to be working very productively. Yeah. So We would rather that everybody worked productively and had a great work-life balance, and that's something that we emphasise. We emphasise it as part of our recruitment process as well, because we often have people coming to us going, "Can you tell us about your overtime policy? You know, how many hours am I going to have to work?" And so we make it really clear that although there are times where yes, you will have to work really hard, those times will be the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's really important. And I think that, there are studios, especially more kind of, I think the younger ones, that typically think that, pushing your artist to the brink of, falling apart is going to get more done in the long run. And it's not the case at all. Like, you get fatigued, you start to make mistakes, and ultimately it's like, you rev the engines when you need to go, not like all the time, because otherwise when it really matters, that's when you're going to start to fall apart and
that's right. There's no petrol in the tank if you do that.
Yeah, you have to also really be aware of the, I guess, boy who cried wolf syndrome of people saying that it's going to be a lot of hours ahead, and those hours actually don't come about and they happen unexpectedly. There's the worst thing, and I think it does happen a lot in visual effects, but you can find that, say, 2 o'clock on a delivery day, that some upstream department has got news that they need to deliver something that wasn't on their radar at all. And that's where critical planning is really important in a facility. We use Shotgun quite extensively and some other scheduling tools as well. With various sizes, when we grow the company from a base of about a core of about 50, 60 people up to the current level of about 170, it takes a lot of production management to ensure that all of those people are busy consistently and not wasting time. It is an expensive endeavour to get people over to Australia, international flights, visas, accommodation, etc. We want that to be as smooth as possible. When we push the urgency, we need them to be working pretty much as soon as they get here as well. But it's one of the things that both Kirsty and I love hearing from the employees, certainly from the overseas employees, in which we've got a really good base at the moment, and some interstate Australian ones, is how different things are to other companies. There's a lot of transparency in this organisation, and people often comment that they would go through a couple of years at another facility and not hear anything about anything that's any prospects that are coming up, any issues that are going on. Fortnightly the company has a Wednesday meeting where there's the owners often stand up the front of the facility and say what's going on in the world. Always asking for confidentiality, of course, because that's an industry killer, a company killer if there are ever leaks. But in terms of sort of rolling it back to the philosophy of the company about how we treat people, we also hear comments about people arriving in some cities to start a new contract without, for example, any accommodation provided for them for that initial 1-2 week start, and being in the situation where they're almost homeless. And it's an interesting sort of middle class poverty that exists in visual effects. So conversely, we have a relocation assistant on board. So when somebody new is starting, they'll introduce them, take them around, look at properties with them, introduce them to shopping districts and things like that as well, and maybe buddy them up with someone if their long-term budget isn't sustainable for an apartment of their own. And it's just, look, I mean, we don't have a silver service for employees. We do expect them to work on their behalf as well, but we want to get people settled as quickly as possible. There are culture shocks, just as may have been for you even going across to America. Can be from Americans coming across to Australia as well.
Or people from anywhere, like things that we would consider to be quite normal. We have to come into the office and going, how do I do this? How do I go to the doctor? Well, here's a medical centre, just ring them. Like, can you do that for me? And I think, people come into a new country, and because we have people coming in from all over the world, we're constantly surprised by things that people find intimidating when they come to a new country, even people who are quite used to traveling. And so we've got people within our HR department who go, okay, cool, we'll come with you to the doctor. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, we're all very well travelled in the HR department, so we can put ourselves in other people's shoes very easily. At SIGGRAPH last year in 2014, a colleague and I were filling up a car, and I predicted that when we went to fill up the car that we'd have trouble with the Bowser because the North American system is so different from the Australian system. We just put it in and pull the trigger and it's filling up the car, but completely different system. So, and it was probably at that point that I started to think, well, if I'm having trouble filling up a car in Canada, then people are going to have problems in Australia of a similar nature. So,
yeah, it'll make you think a little bit.
That was the trick.
Oh, okay. The old pay before you get system. Right.
Trust.
Yeah.
Yet you have to, you're allowed to eat your meal before you actually pay for it. It's kind of. But I do think that. I do think it is like a really important thing because especially when you are relocating somewhere, both for you as well as for the artist or whoever's coming over, like. That is so intimidating and so stressful to find something, and it will end up taking away from artists' time if they've got to go and look for apartments, all the time, and they're stressed about that, and it will weigh on their work. So having that extra support just makes that kind of get eliminated and allows them to kind of focus on, okay, I got brought over here to do a job, I can focus on doing that job rather than all this other stuff that like I wouldn't have to deal with otherwise. So that's really great. Cool. And actually, I just remembered you guys. When you're talking, it reminded me of, I guess you do have a pretty good way of thinking people as well, because I was working on Superman Returns. God, I worked on set in Sydney, but then I worked on it again in LA at the very end, and I remember picking up the phone at 3 a.m, and the person on the other end of the phone was, "Oh, hello, this is Mark Wilde. I'm here with Rising Sun," and
you've got your Aussie accent back on that one. Nice one, Allan.
And I was like, "Mark, it's Allan," and he's like, "Allan, like, what the hell are you doing over there?" And it's just like, "Oh, I'm working on Superman." So I remember shooting the shit with him, but then you guys ended up sending over a big case of Coopers to thank Frantic Films at the very end of the production.
Look, it goes both ways, really, but given that a lot. Why is Rising Sun Pictures still in Adelaide? Why isn't it in Los Angeles and Canada? And it really comes from the owners. They grew up here. They live here. This is hometown for them. And so as an extension of how much they love this town and a lot of the people when they come in here, they love it as well. There's a lot of... We export a bit of South Australian produce, including the Cooper's beer, which is pretty famous.
Best beer. Mm-hmm. Best beer on the planet.
You know
it's
you're
beyond pretty famous.
You know you're in luck when you get a 6-pack of that or a box of Adelaide Hague's chocolate, which is just phenomenal as well. But
wine's good.
Relationships are very important, and we don't take it lightly, the wonderful relationships that we have with studios and with clients and supervisors and producers. Equally, when we have a great outcome on a show, we know that we're part of a bigger picture, no pun intended.
I just got that. When
sorry. Bad jokes. Dad jokes. But we know that we're part of a big picture, and everyone needs to. If we're being successful, there's a good chance the client is having a lot of success. Neither Kirsty or I were engaged on Harry Potter. We weren't with the company at that point, but the RSP worked on, I think it was about 5 shows, and it just built an incredible rapport with the client, and some of those relationships have extended many years after those films have finished. Let's keep it building.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. That's really great. And I kind of figure, like, going back to the productions you worked on, you mentioned X-Men: Day of Futures Past. What about Gravity? Like, what did you guys do on that?
Gravity, we had the Reentry scene, and I'm sure everybody has seen it, so there's no chance of spoilers at all. But the Reentry scene was what we worked on. It wasn't a huge number of shots. It was, I think it was under 21. It was.
It looked great, though. I remember it.
And there was a lot of some big challenges on that show to try and the previous references that had been seen of a space vehicle re-entering Earth's atmosphere were fairly limited in terms of quality. I'm sure NASA has some high-def images, but often the lenses, the casings get very mucked up very quickly. So you miss some of the detail, like the plasma forming in the way that it does. So, and there's a few things such as the curvature of the Earth, which and atmosphere, and how that changes upon entry as well, that are kind of hard to picture. There's obviously a lot of attempts, and it's becoming a lot better in the film industry, but you can sort of age films now by the quality of the planet and the atmosphere. 15 years ago, what we would have seen on the big screen is very different from what we'll see today. And we needed to. I don't know if this was a need, to be perfectly honest, but it certainly helped. But there was a local company that had a high altitude balloon, and we managed to hook up with them, strap a few cameras, and send it into.
I thought you were going to say strap a few artists.
The Houdini artists, effects artists, are really going to the nth degree, but and send that up, many kilometres into the lower atmosphere until the balloon popped and it drifted back down to Earth with its parachute. And some great images came from that. And in fact, while it was happening, there was, I think it was on a Saturday, there was a crew who were able to track progress of its re-entry. Now, obviously, not a lot of footage is particularly usable, but in terms of real-world reference, it was really invaluable for that gravity sequence. It really helped a lot. And a fun geeky thing to do, let's be honest. Who doesn't want to send a camera up into outer space and then look at what it returned?
Exactly. Sorry, I'm busy this weekend. Sending a camera up into outer space just because, I need some reference pictures. But yeah, it does make a good story, and the pictures ended up looking great.
They did,
and the reference image, what they turned out with was good. Also.
It was. They did have. There were a few times when, as a visual effects company, you want to remain true to form and remain accurate with what you're building. And of course, we're building Earth and parts of it. And the natural question that comes in is which part of Earth is this thing landing back in? And the client at the time were very coy. They didn't really commit to an answer at all. We kept pressing, and they kept sort of indicating it wasn't so important, just make it, non-descriptive of some sort. Anyway, at one point, I think the producer sent an image of a large area of Earth and said, which part? And the client came back with a circle that was about a quarter of the size of Earth and said, somewhere in here. Clearly not a story point and not something that they needed to focus on. But so once we got exactly that it was really not critical, it didn't matter if it was somewhere in the northern hemisphere or southern, it just needed to look authentic. We built it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. You're actually absolutely right. Like, I was supervising a show about 2 years ago. We had to do like a big atmosphere re-entry shot, and at the time, like, I was trying to find reference for all my artists, and I couldn't find any. Like, there's movies like Apollo 13, I think, that we're pulling reference from that. It's just like, come on, like, hasn't anyone done one of these like more recently?
No, yeah. There's been a spate recently.
Mission to Mars, there was a bit of one where they fall into the atmosphere a little bit, but there wasn't. I don't know. So just kind of it's kind of those tricky things where it's got to be slightly, it's got to be pretty accurate, but at the same time, you got to be able to visually make it look good and nothing to really base it on.
And that's a challenge when you have something that is moving incredibly fast in space. The eye looks for references to determine how fast it's actually going. Now, movie magic often resolves that by adding sound of rushing wind, of course, but that gets debunked so frequently that there's no sound in space. So you need to have other visual cues to get a sense of velocity. And in fact, moving cameras in the 3D space presented a bunch of challenges. If you have a star plate background, how do you show how quickly you're going in that space? So the Earth was a really critical component of that. In order to, once we got that into scene, we were able to sort of each shot get closer and closer, and the intensity of the glow of the re-entry and the the breakup were the cues that were needed, but a huge amount of timing that was required, and a fair bit of art direction as well throughout the project. It really wasn't just at the beginning, but it was throughout, from our internal art directors, in order to sell the message that we were trying to achieve.
That's really awesome. That's really great, actually. And I know you guys are pretty pressed for time, so I'll try and move through as quick as I can. But I figured I'd ask, just while we're on the subject of projects, like, what would you guys consider to be your proudest or biggest achievement at RSP in terms of projects you guys have taken on?
That's a really hard one. Like,
besides George of the Jungle 2.
I reckon I haven't been with the company very long, but if I look through our reel, I would say that Charlotte's Web was probably the project which catapulted us into the work that we do now in feature film. Would you agree with that, Marcus? It was probably one of the first things that we did really well on, and people were like, wow, Rising Sun are starting to do some really amazing things. Let's give them some more work. And even though it's a film that was made a number of years ago now, it still features on our reel, which I think is probably a testimony to how we feel about it and the strength of the work on it.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember Red Planet you guys did forever ago, like that.
Yeah, that was actually before Charlotte's
Web. That was 2000. I think Charlotte's Web, because I was at Allura for a little bit. I just come back to Australia, and like that was, I think, 2006 for Charlotte's Web. But
yeah, that sounds about right.
Red Planet, I think, like at the time, because like Australia hadn't been doing that much like international or feature film work at all, and like Animal obviously had gotten a couple of projects in, like The Matrix at the time, but you know they weren't the biggest of shots. And but I remember Red Planet was like, you know, for you guys at the time, or RSP back then, for when that project got landed, it was a big deal. It was kind of like, you know, okay, Australia's starting to do some like US feature film work, and you know, it really put you guys on the map. And then since then, like, I've really been blown away by how much iconic work over and over you guys are managing to pick up. And you know, it's not typically small stuff; it's big shots.
I think we're becoming increasingly well known for the quality of our effects and our effects artists. And we have the guys from Side Effects out here recently visiting us, talking to our effects team. And we talk to them because we light in Mantra as well as doing all of our effects in Houdini. And so I think, you know, we work really hard to try and push the limits of what that software can do. And because of that, you know, we are known for our effects, and we often get given sequences that are difficult and require a complete rethinking of how you might approach a particular problem or approach, you know, a particular way of doing things. And we've got some really fantastic effects artists, and we produce some really great photoreal effects. And because of that, we attract, it's kind of like attracts like, because of that, we also attract really good effects artists. And so, you know, we've got, you know, I think, and I'm being a bit biased, obviously, I think we've got the best Houdini effects teams in the world. And certainly when the guys from Side Effects came out, they were like, wow, you guys ask some good questions. You seem to know what you're on about. So we're really proud of that. And we get a lot of really fantastic, you know, destruction work and fluid work and lots of actually procedural stuff at the moment, procedural cities, procedural. Yeah. So our artists really enjoy continuing to push the boundaries on that reputation. And because we've got that reputation in our effects team, that has sort of flow-on effects to our other teams as well. You know, and if everyone's continually pushing the bar, you know, to be the best that you can be and to make every shot the best that you can make it. And, you know, when you get a scene like the scene that we did in X-Men Days of Future Past, it gets nominated for an Academy Award and wins the ES Awards, that's really inspirational to everybody. Everyone goes, wow, not only did we think that we did a good job on that, but somebody else did as well. That's fantastic. You know, how can we now push the next boundary and, you know, make the next thing we do even better? So, you know, left everyone with a really good feeling around here, the work that we did on that. And as a result, we're now, you know, continuing to recruit for our next shows and really hoping that we continue that quality of work. And we've got all the same team here, so there's no reason why we shouldn't.
Yeah, that's really great. With 3 projects currently underway at the moment where we're actively looking to add to our core. So we've got and really the challenge that we have right now is that we've got so many good people on board that not everyone's going to probably get a spot, but we'd love to. It really depends on what the next shows are and the makeup of them. But our core is growing, and just actually on the effects as well. I would have to remark that they're probably one of the most chilled out group of people.
Yeah, they're really relaxed, aren't they?
There is pressure on them at the moment to get a lot of stuff out, but
wouldn't know it.
They're smiling, they're engaging in conversation. They've still got a glow in their skin, which is fantastic.
Yeah, they discuss international techniques of coffee making because they're a very international team.
Yeah.
We've got one of our effects artists is from Greece, and she's got this really specific way of making coffee.
Yeah.
And so then we have various other people. It's the kitchen. Yeah,
the kitchen community is fun.
The kitchen community is largely made up of chilled out effects artists making coffee.
That's awesome.
I mean, there's an interesting thing about RSP, which is that we don't have runners here. And
no, that's true. We don't.
There are messages that go around about the kitchen's a shared responsibility, and when I first joined RSP almost 4 years ago, I was concerned that this isn't what the real industry is like. Having been to other facilities before where there are runners, you see more runners at times than other employees. In fact, I started off as a runner as well 20 odd years ago, but you don't see that here, and that sense of community is fantastic. There's people helping each other out. We have someone sees something that needs to be done, they just do it.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Actually, in Side Effects, their LA office is about 15 meters from my place across the street. So, I'll have to go over and knock on their door sometime. But so that is super cool. I think it's important too to kind of keep it a bit more personal that way, rather than it being such a massive company where you don't really know anyone but the people directly interfacing with you. I'm just kind of curious, like how many people are at RSP, and then also like how many are specifically in production?
We've got about 170 at the moment in-house. That's the total employee count. We're growing by about another 10 to 15 over the next couple of months. We have some more people that are inbound. Production-wise, almost everybody in the company in some way is involved in production, from administration right through to the tech teams. We're really here for one purpose, to have a definitive line about how many people are not involved in that specifically. I'd say probably about one out of 170, we've got about 130, maybe 140 actually, that are more directly hands-on than others. The remaining 30 or so might float between a few projects and help get new projects in the facility as well. But it's the whole company is really geared toward just getting great effects out.
Yeah.
That's great. One thing I just want to get onto is what are the typical tools that you guys use, like both production as well as both the 3D and 2D, but also like production tools too, to like review shows such as CineSync or Shotgun, stuff like that.
Well, we have to use CineSync because
we invented it.
Yep. Well, it's changed the industry massively, like having that tool. So it's awesome.
Yeah. It's just a part of the fabric of visual effects now. So it's used quite a bit here with all client conversations. Software tools.
We use 3D Equalizer for tracking. Mm-hmm. We use Houdini, obviously, for effects. We use Mantra, which is Houdini's lighting package. We use Nuke, obviously, the ubiquitous Nuke for compositing. Mm-hmm. We use Mari for texturing. We use Maya, obviously, for modeling and for animation. And there's a whole lot of other sort of smaller and sundry programs that we might touch on. Like we use Massive for crowds. Obviously, we use a bit of Photoshop. The concept artists might use a bit of ZBrush. There's bits and pieces here and there, but basically our pipeline is very sort of Houdini, Mantra, Nuke based. I would say would be the three, and Maya would be the four main programs that we would use. We've obviously got a pipeline team that develops tools to make everything work better and flow faster. But that's our basic pipeline.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And you guys do a lot of development of your own tools to kind of keep ahead of the game as well, right? Yeah,
I would say so. Particularly, in the sort of Houdini mantra sort of area. We tend to try and push the envelope as much as possible, and we've got a pipeline team of that. One guy is specifically dedicated to Nuke, the rest are sort of more general, and just building tools to make things work better and work faster. We use Shotgun as well to, make everything flow through the pipeline more smoothly and assign shots to artists. So, that's worked very well for us. We were one of the first users of Shotgun, weren't we? And as a result, we tend to work very closely with the people who make it to give them feedback on, how we think it's working and what improvements we think that could be made. So, that works very well for us.
That's great. That's really great. And finally, I'm just kind of curious, like, obviously you have a lot of local talent because Aussies are awesome and they're multi-talented at everything. But at the same time, like, obviously you get a lot of people in, you hire, wherever there's good talent, you're going to pull that in to assemble the dream team of people to work on your productions. I mean, what's typically the ratio, I guess, of like, how many people are coming in from other countries to how many you have locally in Australia?
Probably about a third at the moment of overseas. It varies between about a third and a half, I think, at times. It's interesting that, of course, we know that many of the great Australian artists have moved overseas and are 15 odd feet away from the likes of side effects, of course. But and we're hoping one day to get them back. But the Australian is small in comparison to what Canada may be, and what
and Adelaide's smaller again.
And Adelaide's smaller again. So we're really there are options for people to work in this region. There's some well-known facilities in Sydney, Wellington, Melbourne, and Brisbane. But what we find is that a lot of the Australians can tend to go overseas, but we, and have a couple of years of being cold in Vancouver, for example, and enjoying parts of that. It's a friendly dig. I love Vancouver. And but many are starting to come back, and as the industry grows up and starts to settle down, many people are having children. They're looking for stability. They're looking for a good to bring up their families, and we're finding a lot of people are coming back home, which is fantastic. So.
We also, I guess, sort of, segueing again through the training, are trying to grow as much local talent as possible. Because what Marcus was saying before was correct. The reason the owners and increases and improvements in technology, not just in sync, but other things as well, mean that it really doesn't matter where you do visual effects these days. So they've chosen to do that here. And one of the things that we like to do is give back to our local community and make sure that we work with educational institutions here in South Australia, and that's part of my role, is to make sure that the universities here and the colleges here who teach the basics of CGI and visual effects are doing it in ways that allows them to be employed, with my focus is obviously specifically in photoreal feature film, but that also has a knock-on effect. It means that colleges here are starting to teach people, game art, and there's a far bigger focus, I think, on art for film and games here now than there was sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And a lot of that, I think, is really due to the initiative of Wayne Lewis, who's one of the founders of Rising Sun, who's got a particular passion for education and very much feels the need to give back to the industry that's given him his business. And also to train up South Australians for our own workforce and for an international workforce. So it's kind of exciting to be part of getting that happening. No,
it's really, really cool. And just for people who are wanting to join the RSP team who work overseas, like if you just want to touch on visas, I mean, just so I do think that there's a lot of kind of mystery behind like what the process is. I mean, I think some people like expect you to just hop on a plane, come over. Other people think that it's this huge nightmarish process. I mean, if you want to elaborate a little bit about like what typically you would expect when, maybe you apply and you got to go through the visa process to relocate, and just kind of give a bit of insight into ways you could probably better your chances and, qualify.
It is a complex area, but we have done a lot of work to demystify it. We engage the services of a professional registered immigration agent who just works wonderfully to answer any questions and make it a very smooth process. two main types of visas that we are able to employ on. One is the work and holiday visa, which covers around about 30 odd countries, and Canadians, Americans, British, French, Italians, very wide range of people and we have all this information on our website about which countries are eligible, can generally apply if they haven't had a work and holiday visa, and within 24 hours they get a visa that will allow them to work in Australia for a period of 12 months, and for any one company for no more than 6 months. We love it when we see applicants like that, but they're not always, they may not always have the seniority and skills that we're looking for. Sometimes that takes, we're looking for the industry veteran to come on board. And for that, we will sponsor on something called a 457 visa. And look, there's a couple of things that can make it challenging, but if you're not from South Africa, New Zealand, England, Ireland, Commonwealth, United States or Canada, if you're not from one of those countries and your salary is under a certain threshold, then there's at the moment you need to sit an English test, which is a bit frustrating because it can take some time. We provide guidance on the best way to do that and where to get that completed. And it can be frustrating, but for many places you don't need that. And the process, we've seen somebody from India who had an English test in place, an employee take 8 days to get their visa. We've had a family from the UK come out here, 4 of them, husband, wife and 2 kids, and it took 12 days. We've had other people that have taken about 6 weeks because perhaps their paperwork wasn't in order. Aspects such as if someone is coming out with their wife or their de facto for that matter, if they can prove the nature of the relationship, that's important. But look, I mean, we have a standard set of documents that we send out to people once we've agreed to have them on board, and they've agreed to come and work with us. And
we also work with immigration agents as well. We've got an immigration agent who handles all this stuff for us. And when if we offer you a job with Rising Sun and you accept, we would hold your hand through that whole process. Yeah. It's not something that you would really have to. I mean, if we say, okay, provide us with these documents, you would need to provide them. But other than that, that's something that we would handle. So, yeah, like any country, I guess, there's hoops that you have to jump through to get here. And every country, like I read a lot of the I guess, the posts and stuff on CG Society and some of those other websites where people are going, oh, it's so hard. I tried to get a job in Germany and I got my visa rejected, and I'm a junior and so it's really hard and I can't get jobs in other countries. And yes, that's, I guess, one of the the downsides of working in an industry that is increasingly freelance and increasingly global, is that every country has different visa requirements, and we wouldn't expect you to be, and you really can't be expected to be across the visa requirements for every country, but any facility that you apply for should be clearly across the visa requirements for their own country. So yeah, it's difficult and it's a quagmire, and it's also really hard if you're junior. But if you are junior, I think the key is to get work in your own country first and build up your experience and skill level in your own country first. And then once you get to a certain level, it makes it much easier for other countries to bring you in and employ you. It's really hard for us to employ juniors in Australia who are not Australian, because Australian law encourages us to employ Australian juniors. And there are very clear guidelines in place that, we need, and we want to as well, train and help locals. But once you get to a certain level, then in this industry, I think the sky's really the limit. It's as you know, it's a really global industry, and we've got people here who come here and they'll do 6 months here, and then they'll go do a few months in Vancouver, and they'll go do a few months in London. And if you love travel, once you sort of get past that junior level, then there's a lot of work out there at the moment, I think.
Yep, I turned 21, like legal drinking age in the States, and then I literally, if you check my passport, 1 week later I moved to the States and I didn't really come back, so refused to until I was able to drink.
You suddenly became legal drinking age in the States, Allan? Is this what you're telling me?
No, it was. I used to sit at Ambience with all of the guys who used to work at RSP, like Dan Kripak, James Whitlam, Tim Bale, like all those guys, and I would talk to them about like, man, if I moved to the States now, like what would I do? I'd be going back to being a kid again. Like I couldn't do it. But that brings up a good point. Like I remember there was actually an article you guys did. I think it was in CG Society. Either way, it was like a really great article. There was like one person in the forums who just obviously was a bit bitter and decided to go on a rant.
I remember that. Yeah, you jumped in. Thank you for that.
Well, I never ever do these days, but it was just one of those things where I think it's more of a misconception about like people. Basically, they were saying that, you know, if you're a junior, like they don't want to hire you and waste their time, and that they were talking about like studios worldwide. But for me, it was more about like, look, you know, it's not actually, most of the time it's not actually the studio. Like the studio wants to hire you, but they've actually got to prove to the government that there's no one in the country that can fill this position. So you got to basically prove that no one can qualify to do what you do. And it's a steep thing to call, but it's, you know, it's essentially how this whole thing works. So
there's also a problem as well with the one of the visa categories that we have, the 457 one that we sponsor. That
I love that you said category.
There's a minimum salary a minimum salary threshold that you must pay someone, and that minimum salary is fairly high, a bit higher than what you would pay a junior and entry level person. So if you've got a person locally who is, say, ready to go as a junior, there's $15,000 or $10,000 to $15,000 a year difference in hiring that person from overseas, plus the relocation costs of getting them over to Australia in the first year.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really based on the numbers. We see some great applicants coming in from all over the world. In fact, one of the things we're quite proud of is we try and get back to as many people as we can with some feedback and help them develop their skills, point them in the right direction. But some of the great success stories of this company have come from investing in the local local talent and giving people the opportunities to work on some truly amazing stuff. So, I mean, our education program is really geared towards. We're not selfish about if they don't end up working at Rising Sun Pictures and they end up working somewhere else. We're equally happy that they've got a job in the industry. That's a great outcome. But we talked earlier about that kitchen community that exists here where people have their own coffee culture, but because our courses are delivered on site with the engagement of they're not professional educators, they're people that are actually working day to day in the industry that are talking about the real problems that they're facing each day and delivering lectures and masterclasses in that area. We even have our CFO deliver a masterclass. We have our head of production recruitment. We have production managers deliver masterclasses throughout the 10-week course. We really get great involvement. So the students come out of the training room and they meet up in the kitchen. They force themselves to have lunch there every day so that they can engage and interact. And every fortnight meeting when we're running the course, Kirsty's out the front of the whole studio saying, these are the new people, these are the guys that are on board, make them feel welcome, introduce yourself, tell them a bit about your background and inspire them. And it's wonderful to see. There's just the smiles from people. And, Allan, I think people just love giving, don't they? It's because because we want people to know that a lot more about RSP, but it's very hard to shut us up. We've got lots to say.
It's very true. It's very hard to shut us up. But also because I think visual effects is a relatively new industry, and there's a lot of kids out there who want to get involved in visual effects, and their parents are going, what are you doing that for? Why are you doing that stuff on your computer? What are you drawing for? There's no career in that. There's no money in that. You can't make a living from being an artist. And actually, I think it's the best possible time in history to make money from being an artist. There's more screens with more stuff on them than there ever has been at any other time. And if you're an artist, it's a great time to get your work up on screen. So from my point of view, it's about really I spend a lot of my time going into universities and colleges and talking to everyone from digital arts students to film to physics students and computer science students and going, this is actually a viable career option. This is what a visual effects artist is. Like if you're a physics student, you don't actually have to go and work for, a weapons company or, I don't know.
You don't have to work for Tony Stark.
You don't have to work for Tony Stark. Exactly. You can come work from us and just blow things up virtually.
Poor Tony Stark.
Actually blowing stuff up. So yeah, and a lot of people, especially in Adelaide, which is not like LA or Vancouver, it's not a film town. People don't think of this. They don't realise it exists, and so I get great joy out of going and visiting students and showing them what we do and having them go, oh, wow, okay, so that's how you made that scene in X-Men. I didn't know that. What's a rigger? Tell me what a rigger is,
Mm-hmm.
And so I get great joy out of sharing that with people and sort of seeing the light dawn on their faces when they realise that this is how this stuff is done. It's Australia, or halfway across the world from Hollywood, and that they can do it, that this is something that they could possibly do as well. So yeah, that's one of the things that brings me joy in my job.
I love that. I love the fact that you guys actually have a training department, because I think that it's so invaluable for any company when you get to a certain size, especially if you are bringing in a lot of people from even interstate or just from a different company. Just having even support for them to kind of get up and running quickly with your pipeline, with your workflow, your tools. And I think that a lot of studios typically kind of not frown upon that, but they're misled into thinking that's wasting time to invest in people and they should be trained up and know what they're doing. But the thing is that you're investing a little bit of time to, ahead of time, to let them hit the ground running when they first start and get them more self-sufficient, so that way they're not slowing down, making mistakes, or asking questions to other people constantly, for the first 6 months. So, I think it's so valuable. Do you want to elaborate a little bit? I know we have talked about it, but just more, what your department officially is, and what are the kind of key things that you guys tend to focus on inside?
Sure. Which department?
Your training department.
The training. Okay, cool. Well, basically, the course that we run, which is actually a graduate certificate in creative arts specialising in visual effects, if you want the official title, it's certified by Flinders University here in Adelaide. So it's an official postgraduate certification. And it's run in-house here at RSP for 10 weeks. So students kind of turn up on the first day. We do expect them, they have to submit a reel. So they need to have some basic understanding of the filmmaking process. It helps if they've touched nuke before. We will look at students who haven't touched it, but it really helps if they have. And they then come and learn with us here for 10 weeks. And we get them to work on shots. We set up a special, separate environment for them, so they can't actually access any of the stuff that we're currently working on, because obviously we're bound by confidentiality. We can't have them touching anything that's current. But we use old shots, like things that we've worked on in the past, bits of Harry Potter and bits of Hunger Games, and we might give them a shot, and we would give them very similar conditions and briefs to the ones our artists had when they were on the floor. So we're like, okay, here's a shot from the Hunger Games. You need to, roto this, and then you need to paint this bit out, and you've got, 2 days to do it. So it's under production conditions, as close as possible to production conditions. So therefore they learn our processes. They learn what it's like to work to a deadline. They learn what it's like to work on an actual shot under actual production conditions. They will get actual feedback, and that will be very real feedback. If they need to improve, they'll be told very clearly where they need to improve. And the end result is that, we end up with some really good paint and roto artists.
Trackers.
And trackers as well. We do the same in tracking.
Environment artists.
Yeah, we've got a really good environment artist.
Lighters.
We ended up with a lighting. Yeah, we've had some really great people come through.
That's great.
Yeah, we're expanding on it now. We're just about to launch a course. It's sort of a bit under wraps at the moment, but that will be in Houdini. So we'll look at producing some effects artists as well. We are working closely with the Foundry on a sort of a beta pilot program that they're running at the moment with several places around the world. And we're going to start running new classes after hours. So they're open to anybody. They're not certified, but the material's been provided to us by the Foundry, and we're working with them to get that happening. What else are we doing? We're doing some internal training. So we're looking at how we train people internally and how we can cross-train people. So if you've got someone, for example, who happens to work in lighting or environment, but they want to learn nuke so they can help out in comp when things are busy, we're looking at working on ways that we can facilitate that and make that happen in an easier and more streamlined way.
We've also got, in that regard, we've got, say, some paint and roto people, and some of them have come out of houses where they're really quite restricted. They've been doing paint and roto for a couple of years, and we're giving them opportunities that they haven't had previously. They're receiving, some of them are receiving out or downtime tasks, which is here is a keen node to play with, maybe Primate or similar, and have a go at keying one of these shots. And they get feedback on it as well, and they get to build up their skills, and they move from paint roto artist to junior compositor. It doesn't happen wholesale across the board with every position, but it's up to the individual. If they're motivated to try their hand at something else, then there's that opportunity as well. And obviously our first regard is always servicing the productions. We have to always make sure that they're getting what they need. Probably goes without saying, but just in case there's any lack of clarity there, the projects are always taking first place. But if someone has something that they're interested in, here's the place that they can pick it up. They also pick up the master classes delivered in the 10-week course by All and Sundry. It's an open invitation to anyone in the company to come down and have a look. We have a regular pipeline attendee who comes to every lecture, because he essentially says, my job involves communicating with all members of production. So
I need to understand everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
that was a great initiative.
It really was. And he sits back and asks some questions as well and engages with the students. And none of the people attending sort of get in the way of the students, but the students feel part of the facility again.
And if artists have downtime, they go into the training room, help students out.
Yeah.
So, it's actually created, I haven't really thought about it in great detail, but now I think about it, it actually creates quite a nice culture and sort of quite a nice community of, I guess, learning who are prepared to learn.
Yeah, the spirit of because, I once heard somebody say in this industry that we're not really in the industry of making movies, we're in the industry of change. And if we're to be adaptable and not become old and irrelevant, we need to keep on adapting. So that's really the place where training is a key agenda for the company, and upheld by owners, every member of the facility, really. So it's a really wonderful spirit that exists here. You said before that many companies, or you alluded to that many companies would just expect you to come in and do the work. But what artist out there is creating something that they've been doing for the last 10 years? Every year they're doing something new and different.
Exactly.
Think about our Earths and our atmospheres that we were talking about before. It may have been done in Deep Impact or another film like that, but it's in another 10 years it's going to look completely different again.
Exactly. Like, nobody hires leading studios to get the effect that was done exactly like last year. It's like, no, they want the next best thing. So I love that. And do you get any whiz kids or anyone out of high school that you bring in, you're like, holy crap, you got some skills?
We've had a few of those. We've had David Catmull, who's now our tracking lead.
Yes.
He was just one of those, oh my God, we have to hire this one. He was fresh out of college. There's been a couple of others.
There's been some really good successes there, and we've got our nose to the ground to try and sniff them out when the applications come in. We do have a look at them. We've been in a unique situation in the past where we've had the parents of a 16-year-old come into the office and say, we really want Fred here to quit school and come and work with you guys. I did an apprenticeship when I was young, and look how I turned out all right. And we're in a unique situation of saying to them, look, it's a rite of passage to finish school. We'd encourage them. We'll continue to if they've got summer holidays coming up and they want to come and sit on a desk for 8 weeks or so, they're more than welcome to. We'll provide a little bit of a loose training agenda for them so that they've got something that they can do. They're not going to be, no one ever coming in here under work experience is ever going to be making coffee. That they're going to be given a machine and have a bit of an opportunity to prove what they can do.
Well, we do have an apprentice, actually.
Oh, we've got one starting.
Yeah, we've just got an apprentice concept artist.
Great.
He's just with us. Yeah, he started, his name's Jono. He started a couple of months just working on a project with us, and he's good, and so we're now going to put him through an apprenticeship, and Nick Pill, our art director, is going to look after him, and so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that story about Nick Pill is really key, because we've got the spirit of collaboration and the spirit of passing one's knowledge on means that we get very little pushback from people about having someone being taken under their wing. So we had a great success story with a local who I'd met about 2 years prior to their employment at a graduation ceremony, and introduced the first word that they'd ever heard about this tool called Houdini. They'd never heard of it before, never used it. Then went off, spent some time working on it, got a couple of freelance jobs, had some idle time, came in for, I think it was about 8 weeks or so, and we had a spare machine for them. They had an interest. They weren't working on any production shots at all. This was just stuff that they developed themselves. Nothing went into production. And the effects lead took them under his wing and almost...
Is that Thomas?
Yes. Yeah. And he's now one of our employees. He's doing a fantastic job. And again, without that opportunity of being taken under the wing and provided with that space, it wouldn't have happened. And just seeing the smile on the face is fantastic. So we've got mixing that very, very senior people with people that are just enthusiastic and eager and adaptable.
Yeah. And I think, to finish up, I've been thinking about this while we've been talking, but I think one of the reasons that we do this is, in a way, it's out of necessity, because we are in Adelaide and we are the only, there's Kojo as well that does a little bit, but there's not a massive culture here of visual effects. Like, it's not Vancouver or London or LA, where there is a number of trained people and a number of great schools that train people. There isn't. So we really need to take that responsibility on ourselves. If we want, we are definitely a world-class visual effects house, and we create world-class visual effects. And if we want to get people to the level where we can hire them, we kind of need to take responsibility for that ourselves.
Yeah.
And we have done that, and so far so good. It seems to be working out okay.
That's so cool. And yeah, I was just going to mention, I've been doing, and I mentioned this beforehand, that I've been doing that mentorship for the past couple of months, and that to me has been great because I've brought a lot of people in, and I've been kind of more kicking their butts at like a higher level, doing a lot more advanced material and getting to work with these guys. And one thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of studios that are more like mid-level studios that will bring in maybe 1 or 2 of their employees will be doing these courses, and the whole idea is to get exposed to more of an advanced pipeline and more advanced kind of process and workflow, so that way they can go back to their studio and start to trickle that information back into their studio, reintroduce it, so that way they can grow and kind of expand more to a higher level. And I find that the studios that do that, it's so beneficial. Like going to ILM, what I love is you wrap up on, let's say, Avatar. What will happen is at the end of the project, you'll get guys who will come in and say, hey, when we're doing all the jungle, for instance, maybe you guys can tune into it. This is how we did all the CG foliage and everything else using SpeedTree, using Max and Brazil and everything else. And even at a Blur Studio, a place like that, they do a lot of extra things on the side, like life drawing classes and things like that. And it's really beneficial just to have those additional resources and put time into growing your team, so that way they can continue to expand and get better and better at what they're doing, keep raising the bar and innovating, or as you said, kind of adjusting all the time. So I think it's really important. Do you guys find that in addition to doing all the training that you're doing with new people to the industry to get them up to speed quickly, do you spend some time doing postmortems, shared postmortems, or doing some kind of educational classes with your entire teams?
So we haven't yet.
We're actually jumping ahead on one area, but we have been through.
Separate teams do.
Yeah, we have historically at the end of projects had the post-mortem, and I think one of the things we've learned from doing post-mortems is that it's got such a negative connotation. It is, everything is done by that point, and there's nothing that you can really change to affect the project that happened before. So what's tending to happen now at Rising Sun Pictures is we're doing mid-mortems, and we're getting involved in analysing more frequently at an earlier stage of production if there are any hiccups, what's going on, what can we do to improve things, where are the wins and losses. And in a similar way, we've changed the way that we will communicate with, we run this exit interviews here where we, at the end of the project, we will ask people for feedback on their experience, things that the company can improve upon, and departmental feedback as well. But we're encouraging people to provide feedback much earlier. There's no point at the end of a 5-month contract hearing that somebody had a miserable time in their department, that they didn't get feedback as quickly as they wanted. So we've got a lot more focus now on trying to gather that information at an early stage. We run quarterly pulse surveys, for example, to get a sense of what how people are going out there as well. And members of the executive tend to be, I guess increasingly are being more vocal and putting themselves in front of people and asking, how are you doing? So I'm not sure if that's particularly answering your question, but it's
still, it's great insight.
Yeah, I don't know that the post-mortem aspect it's really ongoing. That's the thing that we've learned over the years, is that the horse is bolted, but by the time the projects are finished, so let's get in early and do it and make corrective adjustments as necessary.
Right, and maybe saying post-mortem might have been a bit misleading, but what I meant more is, sharing all of the knowledge from the project. I do personally think that as long as you're at a studio where, the egos as well as the insecure people are not around, then like post-mortems can actually be very constructive, or at least with like more the leads and soups. But at the same time, like, more sharing knowledge, like doing classes with the rest of the team rather than just the juniors or whatever. So let's say a lighting artist was like, I always wanted to dabble in a bit of effects or whatever, but didn't know where to start. But there's someone staying back tonight to show off some of the work they did on the last project or whatever.
We do have that. I know that the comp team, basically, if they're quiet, they'll run classes, sort of internal classes on a Friday afternoon. And I know Dan, who is one of our effects artists, regularly runs Houdini classes. So it does happen. And one of the things that I'm looking to do moving forward is make that happen in a more structured way and make those available across the company. But it's certainly something that we would like to do moving forward, as I mentioned earlier, is provide cross-skilling opportunities for our entire organisation.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. One thing I was going to mention earlier just about visas and stuff, but I think it might be good to mention is I did an episode a couple of weeks back with Dan Rorty, who used to work at LucasArts when I knew him. And one thing that I thought was really kind of cool was the fact that he always kind of knew that he would need to deal with visas at some point. So he kind of purposely worked ahead of time to always build up his portfolio and, kind of plan ahead to capture every bit of media, every single thing, that publication, whatever counts, to kind of prepare him so that way whenever he needed to do a visa, it would be really easy just to kind of say, all right, here's everything for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So exactly. I think it's kind of a good tactic just to kind of like, maybe to educate people to kind of plan ahead and say, if you're planning to work here next year, start planning now, so that way there's less ramp up time to collect all that material probably.
Yeah, look, definitely. And if I would say the worst kind of applicant that we would have is someone who's applied internationally for a position with us, and we interview, it's fantastic, it's all going really well, and then they, when we go to gather the visa information, nothing is prepared. In fact, there's been instances in the past where people don't even have passports. I don't know if that's...
It's so common in America. It's like, I never need my passport.
Out there, but it talks to one's sense of organisation. So your friend who's highly organised and ready to go, that initial first impression of their self-organisation, and it is, I think, an indication of how they may conduct themselves in the business when they're here as well. And it's such a positive sign. In fact, as recruiters, wearing the recruitment hat, we will pass that information on to production as well, and just say, you're getting someone who's super organised coming through, and we probably got the signals from interview as well that was the case as well. But all those sort of positive 1%ers really make a difference.
Actually, one thing that would be a really great message to get out, and I think this is something that is specific, if you are planning on working in Australia you please go and sit what we would call an IELTS test, which is an international English language test.
Yeah. If you're not American, Canadian, New Zealand, South African, Irish, etc.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't come from an English-speaking country, then you need to sit this test. And that can be a thing which really slows down the visa application process. And when we have applicants from countries who we know will require this test, and they tell us in advance that they've already sat the test and they already have the results, that really improves their chances, because it means that we know that we don't have to wait a month for them even to be able to get into the test, and then another 10 days to get the results. So that can take what might be a month-long visa processing, that can make it take 2.5 months, which means that candidate is no longer viable. So if you want to come and work in Australia, check to see whether you have to sit this test and go ahead and sit it.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up too. Is just like showing that initiative by saying, look, I want to go work here. I've gone and done all this stuff to kind of jump the gun a little bit. I mean, I'm sure it's going to make a really positive impression that like, okay, this person's like really got their shit together. So that's great. And I'm just kind of curious, like, I think this would be really beneficial to everyone. And I've just got one or two more questions. I know how busy you guys are, but what typically happens, like, if you could walk through when someone sends in their application and applies for a job, like from initially sending their application through to finally being hired and brought over, like, what's the typical process? Like, you guys bring it in, where does a reel and where does an application go?
In terms of internally how we store it, etc.
Well, yeah, internally how it processes. I'll leave out like the ones that get denied, but like let's say someone initially reaches out, sends their work in, and says, "I'd love to work for RSP." If you picture a life of an application, where would be the departments and where would it go?
Okay, so we don't delete any applications. All applications are saved so that we can go back many, many years and look at the history of somebody's application. We don't always put every applicant into our database. Our database we tend to reserve for the ones that we think are ready to go employees, those that maybe don't have a couple of years of experience to get under their belt before we can consider them. But look, initially it's an automatic reply that everybody gets. There's a big screening process that we'll go through in order to determine whether or not it's a candidate that we should put forward. It has to be completely relevant to what we're looking for at the time, otherwise it will sort of risk not being directly responded back to. So therefore unsolicited applications, they don't get deleted, but they may not get attention that is expected straight away. It can be frustrating hearing things such as on applications, such as an application with an email with just an attachment and hi as the subject, or re as the subject, and no body, no context, no introduction. It may indicate that there's a poor level of communication. And we often think that when we're interviewing as well, that if are we going to ever put this? Is this person ever going to have a chance of being speaking in front of a client? How will they communicate? And so I tend to do that a lot actually. If the communication is very high, they're succinct, they're to the point, then they'll get noticed very quickly. In a similar way, I think there's a great deal of laziness out there in applicants. So I hate to say it, but it is, and I know where it comes from. It's very, very time consuming to tailor an application specifically to a facility. So I know that a lot of people don't do it, and because as a consequence, we receive applications from people that say, "I've always wanted to work in Vancouver. I've really admired your company.
Yeah,
the work that you did on Avatar was fantastic." And so, and of course, we're not cheeky. We write back and we say, "Look, we're in Adelaide, not Vancouver, and we haven't worked on Avatar, but we love your work anyway." With a smaller company in size, we don't have a team of 15 recruiters on board answering every request. We do ask applicants if they haven't heard from us to begin with.
Especially at the moment we can't really get to it. I actually think this is my next meeting.
Yep.
I might have to go. Allan, I might leave you to finish up with Marcus. Is that all right?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty.
No worries. Thank you for organising this.
No worries.
It's an education meeting.
That's right.
It's got Flinders University.
I do. But lovely to talk to you.
Likewise. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, take care.
Cool.
We don't have I was just saying, we don't have the team of 15 people in recruitment. We're a team of 4 who have different functions, internally and externally focused. But so we can't always get back to everyone. But we really encourage people to understand that it's not a sign that we actually don't care. We actually do give a shit about people in a big way. It's just, so don't take it personally. I think that if we have had this before, where an applicant many years after their initial application, perhaps it was not personally responded back to, we might find that person on LinkedIn, for example, or through a visual effects network, and we say to them, great looking work, we'd love to see an application from you, feel free to apply. And it's happened a couple of times where there's been the response of, well, look, I applied 4 years ago and you guys weren't interested in me at that point. It's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot a little bit because there's no malice with not responding back to people. It's not to make people feel bad. It is simply because people, are incredibly busy.
Yeah, I mean, they got to understand that, like, you guys probably have a lot of applications come through, and, like, you can't take that personally. I mean, it's, you guys are busy, and you'll do the best you can, but you're not going to be like, oh, I hate them, I'm never going to talk to them again because of them, essentially not catering to my ego and sending me a, we've got you on file, email.
And look, never close the door. It's, we've had some experiences. We had one experience recently where an employee has gone through some very personal matters and needed to leave, and they were very concerned about the impression that would leave on their future employment. And there was a very, very clear message that we delivered to them, which was, there's one thing that's more important than anything else, and that is you, and you come first. At the end of the day, you've got to look after number one. You're doing the right thing by doing what you have to do. They urgently had to get back home due to a personal matter, right. And we didn't get in the way of that. We just said, that's really important. And they said, yes, but is this going to affect future employment? Easy and honest response was, we don't close doors here at Rising Sun Pictures. The door is open for people to come back. Life is what gets in the way of a good time at the best of times. But it's you've got to roll with punches.
Yeah,
and
nothing
surprises me anymore in the industry, because every kind of story will walk through the office at one point in the career. So yeah.
Absolutely. I still remember in the late 90s, there was a certain big VFX studio that apparently had, like, the infamous blacklist that you didn't ever want to get on. And I thought it was funny because as Australia progressed, there were more and more studios popping up, and then suddenly they couldn't kind of have that power that they had back then, because a lot of the good staff were just like, all right, well, I'm just going to go to RSP Sydney when that popped up for a bit, and I want to go over these other places, so GMD and whatever else. So,
yeah, that's we don't maintain a blacklist. We do maintain notes from previous interviews. We also try not to rely on the industry insight. So it'd be very easy to pick up the phone to a competitor and say, how is this? How was it with that candidate? But we've got to respect that a candidate's wishes are often that they want certain references to represent them. If we think that the applicant has only chosen references that mates that are going to give them a really good rap, we'll explicitly ask, is it okay if we talk to so and so at this facility who employed you, or this supervisor or production manager who looked at the work? The main thing we're looking for is output, productivity, nailing the brief, and being able to take direction as necessary. After all, we're following the direction of a client somewhere else on the planet, and there's no point having arguments about what we think would look better. It's really what the client wants. So
exactly, yeah, and no, I completely agree. And I'm just going to follow that question I was just saying a minute ago a little bit further, and then we'll start to wrap it up, and I'll let you start your day. But I just want to go back to what we're talking about with like when someone puts an application in. I was just curious because I think that it'd be really valuable, I think, for a lot of people who don't maybe understand, even experienced people, where like when you send an application in, like let's say if it looks good and they decide they want to bring someone on for a specific project, like are there, at RSP, is it going to be more like, okay, well, let's put it in front of the leads for that department on that project and see whether they want to assemble them on that team, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah,
from application through to getting hired.
Sure. So the first step is the major filtering of applicants, understanding the brief. Once we identify someone who we think is got the goods to send through, we don't want to waste the time of our heads of department or leads or supervisors by people that we're pretty sure that they're not required or then they don't need. So as a consequence, we have to have a lot of conversation with the supervisors leading up to the hire to understand what exactly they're after. But we'll typically forward a short list of applicants to the head of department or the compositing supervisor. Comp's a good one to take, for example. We'll go with an initial rating and determine if there's an interview. We'll try and Skype interview them as well, being able to see people, look them in the face and build up camaraderie, determine aspects of body language at times as well. And we're not harsh on people in interview. We're very we're very approachable, and we want people to relax in them as well. So when I'm running an interview, I'll often set the tone of the interview to begin with, and get someone to the point where they are comfortable, because it's not everyone's forte, and right. It can be intimidating, and people often come out of interviews, we've heard at other companies, saying, I felt really like I screwed that up. And so sometimes we'll pause an interview and over Skype and just say, would you like a water? Is everything okay? And we'll encourage people to start telling some great stories from their own past as well, and sharing, trying to find the common language. We don't always find that common language, but once you do, you're onto a winner. So we'll get to that stage. Then, if it's successful, generally we will know within the first 60 seconds of the interview whether that was a good result or not. There'll be universal nods, or some straight away, or there'll be some questions that require further something that hasn't been clear that we may need to ask subsequent questions on. But if we're successful, we'll run reference checks as well, as quickly as possible. We'll then start talking about money very privately. That's a very private thing for people. And negotiate, try and find a common ground there that's within our budget and doable for the applicant as well, that's equitable. And once we prepare an offer for them, a formal offer in writing, and we get an agreement, then if necessary we start the visa process and start working on the handover to production, letting them know when the person's starting, what their skills and background are, what they can expect, their level of experience, so that they can be tasked up fairly well. And then there's the introduction to the company upon arrival, where we have a full induction day to show them systems. That induction day really continues throughout the week as they establish bank accounts, work out tax file numbers and things like that. And it's all very smooth. People, one of the big sort of milestones is, for some reason, is people being able to get a local Australian SIM card. I think communication, you feel naked without it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Then they're generally introduced at the weekly, the fortnightly company meeting, where we put their name in on the screen, and there's a round of applause for those people that have joined us, and they're in. So it's actually a very smooth process. I think the hurdles are sometimes things, and I'm not sure if this is particular to any region at all. It may well be, but there are questions that come up about what's your healthcare policy? Do you provide dental? There's certain things that are very different from Australia. Generally doesn't provide healthcare for employees. The US generally does. So therefore, there's an expectation from North Americans that it will be provided. But unfortunately, if we do provide that, our government taxes about 98%. So for every $100 we might spend on an employee healthcare, it's costing us close to $200 in real costs. So there are some limitations and some differences, and we try and spell those out fairly succinctly to people. On an offer, we send people the working hours policy. We have a PDF that, depending on which part of the world they're coming from, indicates what they can expect on their first day, their first week. Everything from what kind of voltage the electricity system uses to making an international call and itineraries, etc. It's really well covered in the induction packs.
What to do if there's a spider bite?
You haven't gone there because it freaks people out, and that's sent in the offer as well. If we send that in the offer, that if it's got red on it at all, panic.
I swear that's like the number one thing that anyone over here is like, Australia, I would never go there. It's got like dangerous everything. But
I guess I could say the same about North American bears and raccoons. But no, it's look. They're out there as they are in many countries, but I'm yet to hear of an employee that's ever been bitten by a spider. There's certainly none in the facility at all.
Yeah.
But it's just you got to toughen up if you're coming to Australia.
Man up.
Exactly.
No, that's awesome, man. I know that you're really busy and really respect the time you put in. So I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciate everything that you've said.
No problem. Look forward to catching up with you with a Cooper's one day soon, I think. That'd be nice.
That sounds great. But I just want to say thanks again.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so what did you think? I really think this is a great episode, and I really love what those guys are doing. And I want to thank Kirsty, and I want to thank Marcus for taking the time out to do this episode. Finally, all of that aside, I think that there is some really good points they mentioned about being proactive with your visa or your opportunities. So even taking the initiative, like if you start thinking about not specifically about getting a visa, but how to increase your opportunities, let's say that you are in a country that with the other country you want to work for, it doesn't really make it easy to transfer over. The more you're going to understand about this stuff, the more you'll be able to kind of get more strategic with it. So for instance, one of my friends over at Industrial Light and Magic, he is from New Zealand, and Australians always got to make fun of Kiwis, but now I've lost my train of thought. He basically wanted to get a visa to work in the States, and it would actually be a lot more straightforward for him if he was Australian rather than being a Kiwi. And so New Zealanders and Australians have a very close relationship, despite the all the fun stuff, but we actually have a really close relationship. You can go from Australia to New Zealand and work right away, which is why Weta will typically at the end of Lord of the Rings, all those kinds of projects, they'll put out a post saying like, we need people right away. If you're Australian, just hop on a plane, come over. And because of that, vice versa, New Zealanders can come to Australia, and becoming a citizen isn't really that difficult. So because that, what he ended up doing was becoming a Australian citizen, so then he could get the E3 visa to go work in the States, which happens in like a week or two. And just kind of being proactive like that, thinking a little bit about like ways to maximize or work around certain opportunities. Another one is let's say that you've got an ancestry visa you can get, which means that if you're let's say your grandfather or grandmother was Irish, you could get an ancestry visa to become Irish. And you just put in an application and you can get one pretty easily. And then from there, you've got access to the UK. It wouldn't be too difficult to get into the EU to work over there as well. So again, kind of thinking outside the box. This is why one of the episodes coming up, I'm going to be interviewing the biggest law firm, or visa firm, I should say, for dealing with this sort of thing, deal with immigration. And this will be really great, I think, just to kind of cover all bases, from being an artist, getting a visa, to being a studio and needing to hire people. And this is, again, something I will from time to time touch back on, but I think it will be great for anyone really who wants to work in Australia, who wants to work in the UK, who wants to work in the US, Canada, Asia, wherever you want to go, Europe. So this will be a chance to kind of really maximize your opportunities and get more insight, because the more you know about the process, especially from the people who deal with this on a day-to-day basis, the more you really be able to, be more proactive in that regard. Now, a couple of things I was going to mention. Again, LA Drinks Friday, May 1st. Come celebrate my birthday with me. It'd be really fun, actually. I get to meet a lot of people who dig the podcast or listen to it. Maybe not dig it, maybe you hate it. But I've gotten to meet a lot of people so far, and it's been really cool every single time. So again, I'd love to, catch up with some of you guys. And now there's a couple of things I was going to mention. Again, mentorship, if you get on the VIP list, allanmckay.com/inside. But I've been going crazy building a lot of content, building a lot of stuff, I've literally devoted the past month entirely just to building this free training material that I want to give out. And it's just been so cool, but it's kind of made me really hungry to do more. And I want to start getting really proactive on the VIP insiders list with doing more, interacting more with you guys. So what I want to do, I've mentioned the reel review stuff, and probably next episode I'm going to officially announce that. It's just, again, it's going to be something that will be a monthly thing. So kind of like the industry drinks, but for everyone. I've mentioned it before, but basically CG Society and we got together with Blur and we kind of did some really cool stuff last year. Chad One Street actually had a huge influence on actually organizing it all, but it was just a lot of fun doing that. Basically people would send in their reels and we would give really constructive feedback on what to include, what to take out. Again, a lot of us typically look at reels and are the ones who kind of choose who wants to work on our teams and kind of who to bring on. So I've looked at so many reels and kind of, especially more recently, gotten to kind of decide what you can do to kind of maximize your potential of getting in at a lot of the studios that you're applying at. And so this will be something I'm going to be proactively doing. And each month, it'll probably be either mid-month, so it'll be like the 15th or whatever, that we'll be doing a reel review. And each month I'm going to be bringing on another industry expert. So I mentioned Chris Nichols, who's over at Chaos Group, who is a phenomenal artist who does photorealistic stuff. Obviously, we did an episode with him, or I should say I don't know why I say we. I did an episode with him. And by the way, guys, it's 1 a.m. here. I've got a lot of coffee and a lot of work more to do. But yeah, I'm going to be doing one with him, Todd Sheridan Perry. There's going to be more. So I'm going to be bringing on a lot of AAA artists to give their feedback on what you can do to work on your reel and how to improve it. And again, if your stuff's really awesome, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, I'm going to write that name down just so we can recommend them for some jobs whenever, we need people. So anything can happen. It's good to kind of get your name and put your name out there. The other thing I want to do, and this is something that I've just been kind of throwing around the past 2 days, but I am thinking about doing a kind of a webinar career intensive. And this might be spanned over a couple of webinars, but this will be something I'll probably announce in the next month or so when I start to get some free time, because I've not had a day off in I don't know how long. But this is kind of based on, the talk I gave in Paris and a couple other talks I've been giving recently. But I thought it'd be great to do a couple of live webinars where I'll go over a lot of stuff and, more, rather than being more kind of themed to a podcast, it'll literally be more like a big intensive that I want to do, but also open it up for a Q&A. So I can work with you guys, and if you have specific questions that you want to have answered, or just talk about opportunities or, whatever, there's going to be a lot of stuff. So I get enough email and messages all the time about this sort of thing. Even on the weekend, there's a few guys at pretty big studios that were asking, hey, I had this client who completely screwed me. Is it worth my time, kind of hassling them, or what should I do about it? Or other people, who are kind of trying to break out of their typical job and kind of go after their dream job. So, it doesn't matter whether you're just getting your foot into the industry or into the door, or you're actually in one of these cases like Weta, and you're pretty senior stuff at Weta, and you're trying to kind of build your second career. I would love to kind of talk with you guys and do some cool stuff. So I think this could be a lot of fun. And again, maybe I can start bringing other people on, like Chris or Dan Rorty or who the heck knows, to do all these too. And I've got a couple of other really big surprises coming up, really big names, really big artists, and I'm really kind of keen to test out what you guys respond to, whether you found talking with Autodesk and Chaos Group and other companies like that was really insightful, or talking to Dan Rorty and people like that has been really insightful. And I can start to angle this stuff based on that as well. I mean, you know, there's so much phenomenal talent that comes on these podcasts that I'd love to bring on more, and kind of there's guys like Raf Grizzetti, who him, Neil Blevins, a few other guys that we've talked about doing an episode for a while, and I just got to find the time to lock it in, as well as meet with their schedule. But again, I'm really excited about that stuff. So that is it for now, guys. Again, LA Drinks, the mentorship is going to be a big one. That to me is my entire life right now, is opening up the doors for that. It's huge, but yeah, after that, I'm going to be focusing on lots of extra content that's specific to you guys, and I hope that you guys can really benefit from it. So thanks for listening, and next episode is going to be on how to find a mentor, actually, and has not anything to do with the mentorship program, but this is an episode I've been working on for quite a while, which is the importance of having a mentor, and also how to reach out and how to actually get one. Even myself, like, I know plenty of people who have mentors in specific parts of their life, and it really just comes down to what you need and what you're seeking. But I think it's really important to surround yourself with people that are better than you, and I'm not saying in terms of like they're better than you, but in terms of the areas that you're trying to find. So if it's visual effects, or it's in supervising, photography, whatever you want to do, you know, branding, you know, you find the people who are experts in that field and you surround yourself with them. And, you know, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So why not make them the experts in the fields that you want to grow more in? So that's going to be a really great episode. Time for more coffee and a few more hours before I can get this stuff out. So again, thank you for listening, and rock on, guys. Come to LA Drinks.